Hi, everyone. Welcome to Safe Food Handling Practices for Community Partner Organizations. My name is Caitlin. I'm the Health and Nutrition Programs Manager here at the Food Bank, and so I will be your go-to person for any of your food safety questions and, of course, for this training. All right, so what to expect today. If you're watching this video, I am assuming that you are a community partner organization who's going to be distributing non-perishable items in community food boxes at your organization to clients. So we'll go over just sort of an abbreviated food safety training today that pertains only really to those boxes and what you need to know to be distributing those. All right, so a few of the things that we'll touch on today include foodborne illness, so what it is, why it happens, proper hygiene for preventing foodborne illness, safe food storage, food dating, and also a little bit about evaluating food. So foodborne illness, the CDC estimates that about 48 million people per year in the US experience some type of foodborne illness. And out of these 48 million, there are an average of 3,000 deaths and 128,000 people hospitalized. So clearly foodborne illness really ranges in severity, but of course, this is why we take it very seriously. So causes for foodborne illnesses are bacteria and viruses. But these aren't necessarily the only things that can make food unsafe. So of course, bacteria and viruses fall into our biological hazards category, as do parasites and fungi. But there could also be physical hazards to food. So for example, if a glass jar chips and there's a little piece of glass in the food, that could of course put someone in danger. And there's also chemical hazards to food. So often those things that we're using to try to keep food safe, like our cleaners and sanitizers, pesticides, all that good stuff, if those are used improperly or they come into contact with food and the food is contaminated with them, those can actually make food unsafe as well. So these are our three things that we think about when we're thinking about what could make food dangerous. So foodborne illnesses and emergency food programs. It's important to remember that the people that you serve could be especially susceptible to foodborne illness, but luckily those illnesses can be prevented with safe measures, and a lot of these things are very well within your control. So when we're thinking about high-risk groups, some high-risk groups could include seniors and low-income persons. Children and pregnant women are often a lot more susceptible to foodborne illnesses, and also anyone experiencing a chronic disease. And if you don't know if you're serving a high-risk population, it's always a good rule of thumb to assume that you are. Okay, so food safety concerns that are specific to community partner organization sites. So first thing would be unsafe storage, unsafe products, and also poor personal hygiene. So we'll touch on all three of those in this training. So we'll start with the one that seems the simplest, but really is truly the most important, and that is hand washing. So what percent of foodborne illness is caused by improper hand washing? The answer to that question is actually 34%. So when we're thinking about foodborne illness, that's almost a third of foodborne illness that wouldn't even be in the question if everybody washed their hands properly. So it seems like a simple thing, but it is truly very important. So when we're thinking about proper hand washing, these are our steps. So we want to wet hands with running water as hot as we can comfortably stand. Of course, we're applying soap and building up a good lather. And then we want to scrub our hands for 10 to 15 seconds. So if people have heard the phrase about you singing the happy birthday song when you are washing your hands, that's kind of where that comes from. Of course, we're going to rinse thoroughly underwater, and then we'll dry our hands and arms with a single-use paper towel or a hair dryer or a hand dryer, and we'll use that paper to turn off the faucet so we're not picking any germs back up. So this whole process should take about 20 seconds. And where that 20-second number comes from is that's actually how long it takes for the soap to break down the outer layer of the virus so that it can actually be killed. So if we're not washing our hands for that full length of time, we're not actually getting rid of what we're trying to get rid of. All right, so moving on to safe food storage. Now that we're all set on hand washing, how far off the ground should food be stored? So all food should be stored at least 6 inches off of the floor and away from walls and ceilings. And this is just to let the items breathe and make sure that there's good circulation. This extends the shelf life of foods. Some other things to know about storage for non-perishable items or community food boxes would be that they need to be stored in a lockable, secure room so that you can control who has access to them. They need to be stored between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have a relatively normal temperatured building, you should be good there. And then, of course, we also want to store them away from chemicals. So if you're storing them in a room where other things are also being stored, it's important that the chemicals, aren't on a shelf above them or anywhere near them where any type of spill could contaminate one of the boxes. Another thing to think about with storing non-perishable items is rotation. So if you've heard the acronym FIFO before, this stands for first in, first out. And all that means is that you want to hand out your oldest product first and keep your newer product in inventory, just to ensure that you're getting things out in a timely fashion. So for example, if you get a new shipment of community food boxes and you have 2 left over from your last shipment, you'll want to make sure those 2 go out before you get into the new shipment. Another good rule of thumb is to try to move through your inventory in 2 to 3 months. So we're of course checking dates when we are packing the food boxes here at the food bank, but it's important that you're rotating through your stock in a reasonable amount of time so that things are still as fresh as possible when they're going out to clients. All right, so we'll talk a little bit here about pests. So let's say that you are cleaning the food storage area when you notice quite a few ants moving across the floor. What should you do and why? So the answer to that question is that you're going to want to first clean the area, removing any food or other materials that could be attracting the ants. And your second step there for ants or any pest is to try and see if you can tell where they're coming from, right? If there's something obvious, like there's a crack in a door frame that they're getting in through, or they're coming in through a window that you can see really clearly, then that's a nice easy fix. You can deny access and continue to observe to make sure that that really was it and you don't see any more coming in. We never want to spray any chemicals or have open bait stations around food just because that could potentially be a chemical hazard to the food. But anything like a closed bait station, like those mouse traps that the mouse goes in and then can't get back out of, or pest strips and glue boards, those are all okay to use in food storage areas. Now, if the pest issue is anything more than, a couple ants here and there, then you're definitely going to want to work with a licensed pest control operator who can help you really get the situation under control and advise you on next best steps. Okay, so our last thing that we'll touch on today is evaluating food. So a lot of this won't necessarily be super applicable in your day-to-day because, like I mentioned, the food in the community food boxes is checked at the food bank before packing. But if for some reason you had to open up a box, so for example, maybe you had it more than that 2 to 3 month window and you wanted to check on things to make sure everything was still looking okay, or if maybe a box was dropped and you wanted to check to make sure that everything was still okay inside, these are some things that you could look for. So again, I just want to reiterate, you're not expected to be checking on the food all the time, but if one of these situations came up, that could be something that that could be a reason that you would want to check out what's on the inside. All right. So let's say that a client shows you this boxed macaroni and cheese that they received in their food box. And note on the bottom there that the best by date was January 1st of 2023. What should they do with this mac and cheese and why? And for context, I'm making this video on Friday, March 10th of 2023. So it is past the best by date at this point. However, we actually can use foods that are past their sell by or best by date. So especially for boxed items like mac and cheese or a pasta, something like that, these things are actually good for up to a year past their best by or their sell by date. So, and this is true for many products, proper storage and a sound container, though, are very important in maintaining the food safety and quality beyond the sell by or the best by date. So when we're talking about best by and sell by dates, the best by date is the last day that the manufacturer can guarantee that the product is at its highest quality. A sell by date is the last date that the product can be offered for sale at a store. So built into that setting of the sell by date is the assumption that the customer will take it home and likely store it at home for a while before consuming it. So these dates are a lot more closely related to quality guarantees, more so than safety. So on our food bank website, we have this handout called Is This Food Still Good to Eat? And you can see on here, this kind of goes through most foods that you could expect to see in a community food box and lets you know how long past the best by date the food is actually safe to consume for. So you can see on this list here, for example, pancake mix is good for up to 18 months past the best by date. Now, of course, we always share this with the caveat that, if there's any concerns with it, like there's a change in its appearance, color, odor, there's damage to the package, of course, you would want to get rid of those things. And if you have any question in your mind, you're unsure if something is good or not, we always go by the when in doubt, throw it out policy. Now, thinking about questionable food. In general, like I said, when in doubt, throw it out. But for example, in the example that I shared earlier, where maybe a box gets dropped or something and you want to check to see if everything in the box is okay, these are some things that you would look for. So when we're evaluating canned food, the types of food that we would want to get rid of would be cans that have swollen or bulging ends, cans that have sharp dents either on the top or the side seam, or that have dents that run parallel to the rim. Any cans, of course, that have holes, fractures, or punctures we'd want to get rid of, as well as any rusty cans or cans with buckled or pinched ends. Those would all be red flags for us that this food was no longer safe to eat. So of course, we're looking at these two cans. The can that we'd want to discard out of these two is A. You can see the top of that can is bulging there, which is not a good sign about the safety of the food inside of it. So if you're looking at bottled or jarred products, you'd want to discard any bottles or jars that have any chips or cracks that you can see in the glass. Like we mentioned earlier, that could be a physical hazard to the food. Of course, if the product is leaking or discolored, or you can see that there's been damage to the lid, or any evidence that the top has been opened. For example, something that has one of those vacuum pop tops on the top that's already popped, that would be a bad sign about the quality and the safety of the food inside. And evaluating boxed, bagged, or sacked food. So when we're talking about things like maybe sugar or flour or bagged pancake mix, anything like that, you'd want to discard any bags or sacks that have rips, tears, or holes, as well as any rodent or insect damage or any stains or contaminants. This also applies to boxed food, like a pasta or something like that as well. So food recalls. So the food bank receives notice from Feeding America when there's a recall on products that the food bank may have in stock. And then we go through and we identify whether any of our partners have received that product, and we will let you know if you have, and we will let you know next steps as well. So of course, if you hear of a recall yourself and you have concerns about it, feel free to reach out to us. But we try to do a really good job tracking these things and keeping you in the loop when something like this comes up. So if you do have any food safety questions going forward, feel free to reach out to me. I have my number and my email on the screen here. You can feel free to reach out through either of those channels if anything does come up. Please go ahead and take the quiz that was emailed to you with this training, and we will go ahead and get your food safety certificate to you as soon as we have those results back. Thanks so much.